river, through the lock, out onto the lake, and you get a docent, a live docent telling you about the history of Chicago. Again, you can get a discount on that tour because of your purchase of your architecture tour ticket. So talk to our ticketing booths if you're looking for opportunities to get out on the lake. This is going to be a pretty docile boat ride here on the river. Out on the lake though, it can sometimes get a little bumpy. It's a proper boat ride. If you're into that, I highly recommend it. Now folks, I'd like to take a moment here at the beginning of the tour to talk a little bit about what we'll call the natural architecture of the region, beginning with the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes were formed over 14,000 years ago with the melting of a mile-thick glacier from the Wisconsin Ice Age. They hold 20% of the world's fresh water. That's 1/5 of all the available fresh water in the world located in the Great Lakes. Lake Michigan was formed about 10,000 years ago, and it is the third largest of the Great Lakes in area at 22,400 square miles. Third largest in area. The reason I'm so specific there is because Lake Michigan is actually the second largest of the Great Lakes by volume. Now, the thing that really gets me about that little factoid is that it swaps those places with Lake Huron. Chicago sits on the traditional unceded homeland of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, including the Miami, the Ho-Chunk trails. Their impact today can also be seen in many of the names in the region, including the name of the lake, which comes from an Algonquin word, Michigami, which means great water. And then, of course, there's the name of the city itself. When the first European settlers arrived here, they found primarily wetlands in which ramps, a type of pungent wild leek, a relative of onion and garlic, in Chicago, but it is the tallest building in the world designed by a woman. This was designed by Jeannie Gang of Studio Gang, a Chicagoland native and a certified genius. I mean, she was awarded the MacArthur Genius Grant in 2011, so I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to say that. Certified genius, Jeannie. District of Lake Michigan, and he proclaimed himself the ruler of it. He would sell concessions to folks who happened by to gawk at the district of Lake Michigan. He sold off parcels of that land to interested parties. And during the 1893 World's Fair, thinking about some buildings though, folks. As we pass the Sheridan here on the right, I'm going to ask you to take a look out to the right because we're going to see a building coming into view that almost looks... The Continental Hotel was completed in 1929, and it was designed for the exclusive use of the Shriners organization. Now, the Shriners like to pull a lot from Middle Eastern design, so that explains the Moorish dome at the top of that building. It is not, in fact, a reference to our excellent nickname. When they were building that building, they thought that Zeppelin was the future of air travel, so they wanted to make sure there was a place to park them here in the city of Chicago. No Zeppelins have... That's because it's the same Wrigley as Wrigley Field and Wrigley Chewing Gum. The Wrigley Building was opened in 1924 and is designed in a style called Spanish Revival. Now, we'll see a couple of revival styles of the building. This helps to draw the eye upward. They provide a degree of fireproofing to the building, and they are incredibly delicate. So the Wrigley Building has to be washed by hand, which happens annually. The next building we're going to talk about is very easy building. Some of you might recognize that as Gotham City Courthouse from Batman Begins. The third setback up there on the right is the same height as AMA Plaza, the black box building just around on the other side of Trump Tower. This is AMA Plaza, the inspiration for that third setback. AMA Plaza was completed in 1972, and it was designed by a man named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Now, he popularized the phrase, less is more, and I think that philosophy is very well represented by the largest of his black box modernist buildings. Black box modernism is stark and dark, simple and efficient. We're going to discuss it later on in the tour, as well as modernism in general. Now, Mies van der Rohe had a complex called Marina City, designed by a man named Bertrand Goldberg. Bertrand Goldberg believed that buildings should reflect nature, and in his words, there are no right angles in nature. And so we end up with these curvilinear modernist towers. When Marina City was completed in 1968, the downtown area was still largely industrial and quite smelly. There wasn't a lot of demand for residences in the area. Bertrand Goldberg's solution to this was a city within a city. This apartment complex had shops. Now, shifting our attention over to the left side of the river, folks, I'm going to highlight a few buildings that I think incorporate time as an interesting architectural quirk, beginning with 77 West Wacker, that mirrored building with the white stone beyond the bridge on the left. This is designed in a style called neoclassical. Breaking that down, you've got neo, which means neo, and classical, which references the architecture of the ancient world. In this case, we are talking about the ancient Greeks. If you look at the top of the building there, it looks an awful lot like the Greek Parthenon up top. So the inspiration for this building comes to us from the distant past, but the materials and techniques used were much more common in 1992 when the building was completed. Those cutouts represent Chicago's canals, but they also contain patios, which correspond with the heights of neighboring buildings, and another example of contextualism. Everything below that first patio there, though, was originally part of a different building, the Waterview Tower, before construction was halted following the 2008 financial crisis. So the building was actually abandoned for quite a while. It was salvaged, though. The stone exterior along the top there, the short sloped roof, that is the builder's building. The side closest to us was completed in 1927, but the extension out there on the right was completed in the 1980s, 60 years later. You can see, though, how the designers of that extension really honored the intentions of the building, almost like a call and response through time. And so if you've been following along, we've got a spark, we've got a start, and we've got a complete piece of art, all plucked from the past and used by designers to inform their present. Folks, behind us above, we are number 2 worldwide behind Amsterdam. Both the Wells Street Bridge up ahead of us here and the Lake Street Bridge over on the South Branch are double-deck bridges with that top deck serving our L trains. So called because those platforms are elevated. So if you're visiting from out of town, keep your cameras at the ready. There is no more Chicago a photo than catching the train crossing the river. Between the two bridges, by the way, there should be plenty of opportunities to snap that photograph. As we pass under the Wells Street Bridge and come out the other side, we're going to take a look to the right so that I can tell you about this 2.5-acre facade and the building it belongs to, Merchandise Mart, down in 1943. It's an excellent example of Art Deco architecture. It's got long vertical lines, the building's practically wearing pinstripes. It's got deep inset windows to enhance that verticality, and it's got geometric or machined ornamentation. You can see the diamond and chevron patterns along the bottom and along the top of the building. Art Deco has come to represent the opulence and the optimism of the 1920s. 53 to honor the merchant princes of Chicago, and features the likenesses of F.W. Woolworth, A. Montgomery Ward, and Marshall Field, among others. Now, folks, we are making our first approach here to Wolf Point. This is the location on the Chicago River where the north, south, and main branches of the river meet, and it is the historic Chicago, including the first church, the first hotel, and the first theater company. But it was also the location of the first tavern, which was appropriately called the Wolf Point Tavern, and was located on the west bank, right about where that red spiral sculpture sits today. That sculpture is called Constellation, and was designed by Spanish sculptor and architect Santiago Calatrava. Just beyond that sculpture is another contextualist building built in 2017 called River Point. The curve in the front of the building here mirrors the curve of the river down below, but this parabolic slice cut out of the bottom, that's to prevent the building's supports from interrupting the active train tracks that run beneath that plaza. And according to one of my younger guests, that is Fulton House. Fulton House was constructed in 1898 as a cold storage facility. Between the Civil War and the 1920s, Chicago was the center of meat production here in the States. The poet Carl Sandburg described Chicago as hog butcher for the world. Barges of meat would come up from the Union Stock and stuffed with cork and horsehair as insulation. So my apologies to any vegans on the boat. Right between its original function and its construction, Fulton House is not vegan friendly. Harry Weiss also designed the River Cottages coming up here right next door. These whimsical postmodernist townhomes coming up on the left, these were completed in 1988, and they feature some elements from Harry Weiss's love of sailing. You can see the round, almost porthole style windows, as well as the prominent use of triangles said to be inspired by the sails of his boats. Now, for those of you that might be about that riverfront life, you may be interested to learn that the third townhome from the left here last sold in 2015 for $2.25 million. Now, at that price point, you can also flag me down if you have any questions. Thank you. Alrighty, folks, we are approaching a couple more of our fixed trunnion bascule bridges. So I'm going to break down that term for you because I needed it broken down for me when I first started doing this. The term trunnion refers to the pivot point. These have a fixed pivot point, a fixed trunnion. And the word bascule comes from a French word for seesaw. So that's an illustration of the way these bridges raise and lower. Both the Kinzie Street Bridge here and the Carroll Avenue Railroad Bridge in its raised position out there on the left side of the river are single-leaf bascule bridges. So the entire bridge raises to one side of the river, as opposed to double-leaf bridges where the bridge raises in two parts, one on each side. When the Carroll Avenue Railroad Bridge here was completed in 1908, it was the longest and heaviest bascule bridge in the world. It served a number of railroad customers on the east side. Into the ground here, almost like somebody jammed a pencil into the riverfront. That is 150 North Riverside. The reason it's got that sort of V shape or Y shape and at the bottom is because of the limitations of the land that it sits on. The back 2/3 of that lot have active underground Metra and Amtrak trains that run through there. And the front side is subject to a zoning law that requires a 30-foot setback for any buildings built along the Chicago River. This is to ensure that the riverfront remains open and accessible to the public. Buildings out that down that main branch. It's a really lovely photo opportunity coming up here. I'm telling you, this is going to be the photo you show your friends when you get home to let them know the great time you had in Chicago. I mean, if that doesn't scream lock screen, I don't know what does. Something called inertial slosh dampers. That's fun to say, so I'm going to say it again. Inertial slosh dampers. There are 12 concrete tanks at the top of that building containing 160,000 gallons of water. When the wind pushes the building one way, the water sloshes back the other way, which helps to dampen that inertial force and keeps the building from moving too much in the wind. We will discuss a couple of methods over the course of the tour of how builders manage drift. Tripod legs out front, that is Bank of America Tower. And those metal tripod legs are this building's response to that 30-foot setback requirement. By vaulting the 3rd floor into the air, they're able to maintain public access to the riverfront. Bank of America Tower costs $800 million to build. That's a lot of overdraft fees. And being that it was completed in 2020, they were able to incorporate a number of technologies that proved beneficial during the pandemic. Art Deco buildings on either side of the river. We're going to discuss the Civic Opera building up there on the left on a return trip. But first, I want to direct your attention to 2 North Riverside Plaza coming into view just beyond the bridge here on the right. This was originally the Chicago Daily News building, and it's one of the first skyscrapers in the world to include an open-air public plaza as part of its design. This also makes it the first building in Chicago to intentionally develop toward the river. The building facing us here on the river, though, also features bas-reliefs, or ornamental carvings, which highlight the history of journalism and provide insight from it in the States. 2 North Riverside Plaza was completed in 1929. That's the same year that the stock market crashed, sending us into the Great Depression. Follow that up with World War II, and it would be about 25 years before new buildings started going up again. And by the time they did, tastes had changed. Because when you compare the opulence of the 1920s to the austere Gateway Centers 1 and 2, these black box buildings coming to view beyond the bridge here on the right, completed in 1965 and 1967 respectively, are excellent examples of that black box modernist style. They are stark and dark, meant to be beautiful. These are meant to be functional. Now this is a style that I mentioned earlier was popularized by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, but these two were actually designed by the firms Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Their perceived habit at the time of imitating Mies's work here and other places work in person, you could take the Green Line out to Oak Park to do so. Now, as we move past the black boxes of Gateway Centers 1 and 2, we're going to approach the white box that is Gateway Center 3, also on the right. Since buildings like this could be and have been built in cities all over the world without looking out of place. By cladding the building in stone or concrete, it softens the look of it somewhat compared to the stark black boxes. And it also makes it more efficient to heat and cool because it doesn't have that exposed heat absorbing metal on the outside of the building. The stone, or the concrete in this case, provides a bit of insulation behind the modernist styles of the 50s, 60s, and 70s as we approach an early example of contextualism in Gateway Center 4. It's this curved glass building coming into view up ahead of us on the right. Completed in 1983, the curve and color of Gateway 4 Mirror Center. This is done intentionally to provide the overall effect of reflections on a rippled surface of water. All of these design elements put it in strong relationship with the Chicago River. But if you're curious about your own relationship with the Chicago River, then look no further than the massive map coming up here on our left.